Tonight, body identified. The remains are that of a man missing since February. Overdose deaths. 3 people have died in Fort St. John in 6 days from toxic drugs. Cause for concern, snowpack levels drop in northeast BC. Good evening and thank you for joining us. And we begin tonight with the human remains found in Fort Nelson earlier this week. A body was found near Klahani Drive on Tuesday, and now sources tell CJDC-TV News the remains are those of a missing man, Michael McCann. The Northern Rockies RCMP releasing very little information on this case. CJDC-TV News reached out to the police in Fort St. John. We asked if the death was suspicious in nature and if there was any threat to public safety. The Mounties were unable to confirm any of that information as it's early in their investigation. We also asked police why they issued a report back on February the 17th saying McCann was missing. They did not answer that question. Now, it's believed McCann was found near an abandoned home. However, we cannot independently verify that information. And it's also unclear how long McCann's body may have been there. The investigation into his death continues. Fort St. John RCMP are sounding the alarm after 3 overdose deaths in less than a week. Mounties say from April the 3rd to the 9th, there were 3 sudden deaths. The suspected cause is a counterfeit round white pill being sold as oxycodone. In all 3 cases, a powerful synthetic opiate was discovered. Police say it is as powerful, if not more so, than fentanyl, but experts say the drug doesn't register on fentanyl test strips. At the end of March, Northern Health issued a toxic drug warning for all of northern BC. That warning was for a round white pill being sold as oxycodone, which contains the same synthetic opiate. Police are reminding those using drugs to never use alone. They also stress the need to carry naloxone kits, which are free at clinics around Fort St. John and the Salvation Army. Mounties in Fort St. John are looking for a missing woman. Police are asking for the public's help in locating Emily Ogden. Mounties say the 24-year-old is considered missing and her family and police are concerned for her safety. Ogden is being described as a Caucasian female standing 5 feet 10 inches tall. She weighs 155 pounds and has brown eyes with light blonde and brown hair. She also has a large honeycomb tattoo on her neck. If you have any information on her whereabouts, you are being asked to contact the Fort St. John RCMP at the number listed at the bottom of your screen. Well, with warmer weather upon us here in northeast BC, concerns now turning to the ongoing drought situation. BC's River Forecast Centre providing an update on April snowpack levels. The snowpack in the Peace region currently sits at 76% of normal. That's a slight drop from the 79% in March. Now, as for the Fort Nelson and the surrounding Liard region, the snowpack as of April 1st is 81% of normal, and that's an 18% decrease from the previous month. The BC River Forecast says as far as the ongoing drought situation, these numbers are cause for concern. However, the rain in this spring will be the main factor in determining drought conditions here in the Northeast. The average snowpack level for the province is at 79%. That's a 6% increase from March. In what could be a big boost for the Peace region economy, the BC government has quietly eased emission rules for liquefied natural gas. The move is prompting pushback, however, from environmental groups. And as Martin McMahon reports, it comes with renewed interest in resource extraction during what has become challenging economic times.
Depending on who you talk to, liquefied natural gas projects represent a major economic opportunity for BC or a significant environmental step backward. And 2 weeks ago, the province discreetly posted a letter on a government website outlining an easing of emissions requirements for LNG projects. No press release.
In my opinion, it's a signal from the BC government that they are trying to maintain their self-branding as a climate leader while moving forward with a very anti-climate industry.
But for those who back the industry, this is viewed as a necessary step.
I think that this is a perfectly practical and beneficial climate policy to have, because it will get lower emissions fuels to places in the world that are desperate for them. They've come practically begging to Canada. And we've been saying no to them for too long.
It comes as the frontrunners in the federal election push to ease regulations for resource extraction projects as a way of boosting an economy battered by the trade war with the U.S.
We will move for projects of national interest to remove duplication in terms of environmental assessments and other approvals.
The Conservative leader also outlined a series of proposals to simplify regulation.
Either you do these 5 things, or we will stay dependent on the Americans.
Energy Minister Adrian Dix was not made available for an interview, but in his statement insists this is a clarification of existing policy, not a change, saying that if grid electricity is not available to project proponents, they will not be penalized for factors beyond their control. Martin McMahon, CTV News, Vancouver.
Well, Donald Trump hit the pause button on global tariffs, but not for Canada and Mexico. And now BC Premier David Eby says that's insulting. Trump is keeping fentanyl-related tariffs in place, as well as 25% duties on steel, aluminum, and automobile imports for Canada. Well, now the Premier is directing all BC Crown corporations, ministries, and health authorities to cancel American contracts wherever possible. Eby says BC needs to be prepared and stand on its own, with Trump repeatedly changing his mind on tariffs. Day 19 on the federal election campaign trail saw the race between the Liberals and the Conservatives tighten. Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre are trying to garner votes, highlighting 2 very different issues. CTV's Kamel Caramelli reports.
Hey guys.
Surrounded by construction workers inside a newly built home in Milton, Ontario, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre continued to build his campaign on affordability today, this time focusing on housing.
We need to bring homes that Canadians can afford.
He says he would offer municipalities up to $50,000 in reimbursement if they cut taxes on building new homes. Those savings would then be passed down to home buyers, also scrapping the federal sales tax on new homes.
Each of those measures will save up to $50 grand on the cost of a single home. That's a total of $100,000.
Going back to school.
Liberal leader Mark Carney with his campaign's focus on gun violence today. The Liberals promising to automatically revoke gun licenses for people convicted of violent offenses and restarting a buyback program for assault-style guns, while also committing to stopping guns from crossing the border.
And we will build on this foundation by recruiting 1,000 more RCMP personnel and increasing the pay for cadet recruits.
Nice to see y'all.
But the NDP choosing to target Carney today, the Liberal leader has promised to balance the country's operating spending in 3 years. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh claims that would result in more than $40 billion in spending cuts.
My commitment to you as New Democrats will never support a budget that cuts the things that you need. We will never support a budget that cuts health care.
Mark Carney set to take a quick pause from the campaign trail now, returning to Ottawa to hold a meeting and discuss matters on how to respond to the latest twist in U.S. tariffs. Kamal Karamali, CTV News, Toronto.
And polling numbers came up on the campaign trail today. The Conservatives continue to attract big crowds at rallies across the country, but they say that is not being reflected in the opinion polls. Rachel Aiello explains.
Standing at the back of the room at Pierre Poilievre's Brampton rally were half a dozen people donning "Do You Believe the Polls" sweaters. And while the Conservative Party has sought to distance themselves from the group's message, today Poilievre was pressed on what he makes of the national numbers.
Do you believe the polls, and can you commit today that you will respect the results of the election no matter the outcome?
Yes. And that decision will be based on whether, after a lost Liberal decade of rising crime and costs and a falling economy under America's thumb, we can afford a 4th Liberal term, or whether we want change.
Seeking clarity on whether that yes was to both questions, reporters tried to follow up. Poilievre was not the only one to be asked today about trusting the polls and the integrity of the vote.
Of course. Okay. This is Canada. This is Canada. I know there's certain parties that just import all their slogans and their policies from America, but let's not import that nonsense into Canada.
In Saskatoon, Jagmeet Singh said while he has doubts that the NDP's support is being captured in national polling, he'll respect the outcome.
We're New Democrats. Democracy is in our name, so of course we'd accept it.
With 18 days left to lock in votes and an additional seat up for grabs in Ontario, thanks to redistribution, both Poilievre and Carney are continuing their campaigning in vote-rich Ontario this evening. And Singh will be back on the hustings in this province in the coming days.
Conservative sources are reminding reporters today that polls can and do move, and ultimately repeating that oft-repeated sentiment that the only poll that matters is on Election Day.
Rachel Aiello, CTV News, Ottawa.
Canadians are making less return trips from the United States. New numbers from Stats Canada show the number of Canadians making return trips to the U.S. by air were down nearly 14% in March compared to the same time last year. Return trips by car took an even sharper decline. They were down almost 32%. Stats Can says return trips from other countries were up about 9% over the same period. Last week, Canada updated its advisory to warn Canadians traveling to the United States that they may face scrutiny from border guards and the possibility of detention if denied entry. To a developing story now in New York City where a helicopter has crashed. Police say the helicopter went down in the Hudson River near Lower Manhattan. New Yorkers are being warned to expect delays because of emergency vehicles on scene. A Spanish family of 6, including 3 children, are reported to have died in the crash. A woman with dual citizenship has been freed in a prisoner swap between Russia and the United States. Ksenia Karolina has been imprisoned in Russia on treason charges. Karolina was released in exchange for a Russian man jailed on smuggling charges in the U.S. She was arrested and jailed last year, convicted of treason, after making a $52 donation to a Ukrainian aid charity. Her release is the latest in a series of high-profile prisoner exchanges between the countries in the last 3 years. In business news, stocks slid once again today. They were dragged down by fears over the ongoing trade war after shooting higher yesterday. Andrew Bell from B&M Bloomberg has the details.
Hello there. Forget bulls and bears. One B&N Bloomberg guest, Stan Wong of Scotia Wealth, told us today we're in a kangaroo market. Canadian and U.S. stocks dropped about 3% today as U.S. President Donald Trump raises the stakes in his trade war with China. The White House said levies on Chinese goods are actually 145%, made up of 125% announced yesterday by Trump, plus 20% previously imposed for China's alleged role in fentanyl supply. That has put Trump on a collision course with Chinese President Xi Jinping, who has already announced countermeasures, including a cut in the number of U.S. movies he's allowing into the Chinese market. Gold hit a new record high today, above $3,155 U.S. an ounce, as investors sought a safe haven. The U.S. dollar fell against international currencies, and the Canadian dollar changed hands at 71.5 U.S. cents, up almost 2/3 of a U.S. cent. West Texas Intermediate oil was at $59.63, down $2.19. Our latest fix on Western Canadian Select oil, $51.44, up $1.64. And the TSX Composite ended at 23,014.87, down just over 712 points. That's the latest in business. I'm Andrew Bell of B&N Bloomberg.
The 50th annual Fort St. John Trade Show is taking place this weekend. The show, sponsored by Tourmaline, begins Friday and runs until Sunday at the Pomeroy Sports Centre. Hundreds of vendors and local businesses taking part. Trade show manager Christina Hogar says there's also a lot of fun activities for kids. This year, the Philip J. Currie Dinosaur Museum will be there for the first time with presentations from staff. Hogar says, come hungry, as this year's event will feature dozens of food vendors. In addition, door prizes including barbecues and a $750 meat package. Admission is $8 for adults, $6 for youth and seniors, and children under 8 are free. All right, please stay tuned. I'll be right back with weather.